Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. It's been a heck of a week. We've had a budget, we've had all sorts of things going on and lots to talk about, so let's get the guys in right away. Over there in Edinburgh we have got Lloyd Quinnan. Lloyd, hello, how are you?
I'm well now that I'm not on mute.
Without even getting a pound out of you, how dare it.
Yep.
Nice to see you again. And over there in the US of A, our Coatbridge Cavalier, Mr. Boswell, in Washington DC, our Washington correspondent today.
Aye, cracking. Loving it here over all week. In DC doing working with on the project I'm working on just now, and doing a bit of networking with my boss. For some reason he thinks we may be able to get some more work here in spite of the Trump's cuts but on government spending, but because it's government projects we do around the world pretty much. We're doing a lot of military stuff at the minute. But aye, the well is running a wee bit dry. Well, let's see how it all goes.
And of course you will be visiting somewhere else next week. It should be quite interesting for you.
Yes, it should. Apparently the gin capital of Spain.
Indeed it is. Yes, I was looking forward to it. And up there in the city of discovery, it's our Alan Petrie. Hi Alan, how you doing, buddy?
We're doing quite good. Had a great week this week. Megan started, she's on her second week of CBD and only one seizure at school.
Yeah, I told you. But, yeah, it's great stuff. I recommend it. And also THC oil I would recommend for those
Great
with all sorts of different ailments. I grow and make my own. And up there in Clackmannan, everybody's favourite lawyer, our Eva. Eva, how are you?
Hello, Roddy. It's been one of those weeks of things you never thought you would see. But you may be sitting in the gin capital of Europe, whereas I have the great privilege of sitting in the whisky capital of the world in Clackmannanshire. And on Saturday, the 12th of April, is the Whisky Festival in the Town Hall in Alloa. So for those of you who are at a loose end, buy your ticket and come along and see the wee county at its finest.
Oh, if you're a whisky man, something I can't take. I'm like Chief Crazy Horse right off the reservation when I take that stuff, so I never touch it. Anyway, let's get started. There was a budget this week, but I just want to remind everyone, and I'm going to do this quite a lot, there's going to be a lot of prisms where I'm going to do this, because I want to, just before we start talking about it, remember this, folks.
Scottish Labour has all the answers.
Let me say it directly, John, and read my lips. No austerity under Labour.
Rachel Reeves's first major intervention is
No austerity under Labour, Lloyd. And yet, this week we had a Labour budget. I think it's a Labour Party. At least that's the label that they're sitting under. And it was a hell of a budget where they're trying to convince us that it's the land of milk and honey and it was a bit of brilliance. But in fact, it's been an absolute disaster, especially for Scotland. It is more austerity. Watch my lips, Lloyd. It's austerity.
It's absolutely austerity, but I think this just shows us exactly what the values are of the current Labour Party, and the current values of the Labour Party are to keep themselves in power and to play on the international stage like the big kids that they actually are. The tragedy of this is that the media has moved on to this kind of fake news of the problem is welfare. When did we start talking about social security as welfare? This is not the United States. We need to get off using other people's words and use the words that are direct, which is, this is social security, paid for out of your national insurance contributions. Welfare is the purpose of a government. What is a government for if it is not to protect and defend the people of the country? And that doesn't mean giving people guns to go and kill folk in other countries. It means making sure that your old people don't have to worry in the twilight years. It's about making sure that your children have a proper opportunity, that they don't go to school, in constantly in second-hand clothes and hungry. The simple fact of the matter is this Labour Party has shown itself to be a party very much of their own elite class. Everybody at the bottom of the ladder is an afterthought to this current Labour Party. The simple fact that they started off by taking away the money from the WASPy women, stealing their pensions effectively, then cutting the winter fuel allowance and refusing to get rid of the 2-child cap. This is a government opposed to the people, and people need to start seeing that. They are opposed to the people.
Yeah, they are indeed. But here's the other thing. What we're saying is, Phil, that this is going to actually push another 250,000 people into poverty. This is what it's going to do. They're refusing to tax the rich, and instead they're taxing the poor. That's the reality.
It is, and it's absolutely disgusting. But the thing is, we've seen it all before. You know, this is 250,000 people extra pushed into poverty, and this is the wealthy, allegedly the wealthy, but mostly pensioners and others that risk of new tax raids in this open budget. Now, experts have warned this is a problem. The people that are telling us this aren't telling us the whole truth. So she stopped short of ruling out further tax rises or spending cuts, as a new poll reveals public losing confidence in Labour following the spring statement. Now, pensioners and the wealthy, they're not going to get it, could face a shock tax raid by Rachel Reeves at the autumn budget if the worsening economic forecast fails to improve. Leading economists have warned. But the reason we're in it, what they're not telling us is, the reason we're in a mess is because of the usury that the Western governments have been following, the asset stripping that Europe, America and Britain have been following, stealing by the elite of the essential, the necessary to make us live, to allow us to live decent and reasonable lives. It's been enabled by governments, bought by lobbyists, not investing in our people, proxy war with Russia, who's not our enemy, and other assorted thefts. So the director of, Paul Johnson, director of the highly respected Institute of Fiscal Studies, well, respected by whom exactly? I'll qualify that one a wee bit. But they raised concern about the spring statement and talked about the challenges in the economy. They can understand that, but who suffers? And in particular, they're trying to blame Donald Trump imposing wide-ranging tariffs on top of the 25% announced on car imports on Thursday. Why is that affecting us as much? It's not. This is what the papers report. They're not telling us the truth. The reality is our governments are responsible for the state of our economy. And our government is not really our government. It's owned by the lobbyists, who are owned by the corporations, and they're getting what they want out of it, which is the asset stripping as the West, as we head into one of the greatest financial crises and one of the greatest crashes that tragically we're going to ever experience. It's going to be worse than 2008. Terrible, terrible. The signs are all there, folks. I'm really sorry to say, but experts, real experts, objective experts who tell the truth, who you won't get in mainstream media, are pointing this out. So that's what we've got to follow, not these clowns.
No. And here's the other thing, Eva. I mean, well, John, watch my lips, John, there will be no austerity. And of course, as you can imagine, as soon as the budget was declared, he defended them. Oh yeah, they're fine. Nothing wrong, the poor are not being taxed enough. There's Sarwar defending the cuts. The Labour man who wants to be the new First Minister.
I wouldn't like to be in the Labour Party canvassing team chapping doors in Scottish council estates next year, immediately before the Holyrood election, that's for sure. Roddy, every week we all do our revision for Prism, and we read up on the news and we look at the detail, and I tend to look at the figures and the numbers. And this week I thought, I can't be arsed with that anymore, because this isn't about figures and numbers. This is about principles and values and ideals. And you need to look no further than the government website for HMRC, where they tell you about this spring statement, and they tell you the Labour government's priorities. And the devil, as always, is in the detail and in the finale. The introductory paragraph says, this government is focused on securing Britain's future through its plan for change. There haven't been any changes because this government is simply out-Torying the Tories. However, their priorities are, allegedly, driving economic growth, building an NHS fit for the future, and keeping the country safe. And there's the clue, keeping the country safe. It's a budget for war. It's a budget for warmongering. It's a budget for strutting about on the international stage like an overblown, overindulged peacock, enjoying the opportunity of some publicity by continuing with the war in Ukraine. And what is alleged in the statement is stability. Apparently there's been stability since this government was elected, but stability is paying off. The Bank of England have cut the interest rate 3 times, but since the autumn, the world has changed. Europe is facing a generational challenge to its collective security. Global economic uncertainty has increased, growth has slowed, and borrowing costs have risen. All of that is a load of guff. It's a smoke screen, and it's lies, and it's there to paper over the cracks, which simply show that this government has almost immediately it was elected, ditched every single founding aim and ambition of the Labour Party, and ditched every promise that they made to get the votes of the people that put them where they are. And the people of Scotland have to take this on board and have to do what the Unionists did in 2014 and unite as an independence movement and remove ourselves from that union forthwith, and we can do it next year. And we've got to do it because the budget makes it absolutely crystal clear that the priorities of this government are not either the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, the disabled, the women suffering from the 2-child rape clause, those suffering as the result of the bedroom tax, or those who are currently on the fringes of poverty and going to be plunged into it as the result of the privations visited upon them by those who were elected to save them. The time is now for a Scottish revolution. You know, I've spoken before about Alex Salmond and how much we miss him. But what do you think his reaction would have been to that statement last week? He would have been lifting that mace, and he would have pretty well have been saying, "Ram it where the sun doesn't shine, Rachel from accounts." He would have been standing up for Scotland, and he'd have been spelling out in words of one syllable why it is that independence is needed now more than ever.
Absolutely, it always is. But that's not what Ian Murray, the Governor-General, London's man in Scotland, the man that likes to wear a Union Jack suit, he says Scotland's voice is heard loud and clear ahead of the spending review, Alan. And then we find out, well, what was the voice saying? The financial institution says we'll be 900 million down. So what voice were they listening to, Alan?
Well, Murray listens to no voices except for his masters from Westminster. Everyone knows that. I mean, Rachel from accounts, she's like the wicked witch of Westminster, spreading her evil right across our land, attacking the most vulnerable people in our society. Well, let's just hope that, like the Wizard of Oz, one of the houses that they're supposed to be building lands flat right on top of our head and puts all out of our misery. Then you've got Starmer, the man who's the puppet of Starmer. And remember, just before that budget was announced, Starmer said, and his exact words were, Labour in Scotland. Not Scottish Labour. Labour in Scotland. You're a branch manager, Starmer. Nothing else. You're just licking the boots of your English masters, while your Scottish citizens are starving to death. But he is right in one thing. This isn't austerity. This has gone beyond austerity. This is now murder by poverty. They are starving people to death. The most vulnerable people in our society. Even the cuts that they're making, it's to mental health, while at the same time they're sending boys and girls over to fight in wars, where they will come back with PTSD, one of the most prolific mental health problems. So what they're telling these people is, go and fight for us, but see when you come back, you're on your own. You're getting no support from us. That's how this colonised parliament works. And it's time the people of Scotland stood up and said, no more. Don't wait to 26. Get on the streets now. Demand our right to freedom. because freedom is the only way we will get away from Westminster and Rachel Reeves.
Indeed it is. And one of the things they're saying, they won't tax the rich, Lloyd, and they're rolling it. It's like the drip down, what's it, drip down economics. This is one of the big ones. Well, if we tax the very rich people, they'll leave and they won't come back. But that is a myth, because here's a story I picked up this week. In Norway, they increased the tax on the wealthy by 1.1%. And although 30 of their millionaires left, the tax revenue went up, because actually they don't leave. They don't leave, they stay, they grin. No one wants to pay taxes, but they won't leave, because they like, it's more than just about the tax regime. It's the lifestyle, it's everything else. But Norway's proved these people won't move. Some might, but the tax take will go up and we could tax them. If we do it at 2% on people with more than £10 million worth of assets, we would raise 24 billion. Lloyd, 24 billion with just 2% on those very, very rich.
Well, yes, that's what we should have been doing. Is what did happen in the past. I remember the outcries when the tax level went up in the 70s to 19 shillings and sixpence in the pound. For those of you who understand old money, Britain has built itself after destroying its manufacturing industry during the Thatcher period. They moved everything to the service economy and to the buying and selling money in the City of London, investment and de-investment. That was the basis of the British economy. And now, when they have money, they've attracted people who operate in that world. They don't want to make things, they just want to make money. Make money by stopping people making things, in actual fact. But this again, it's back to what I said in the answer to the first question. This shows the principles of this current Labour Party are more locked into the people that they hang about with. Reeves is extremely rich. Liz Kendall, is it? She lives in a £4 million house. These people haven't touched the hems of the skirts of anybody from the lower orders for years. These people that tell you that they knock on doors and what they hear on doors is this. These people haven't done that for years and years and years. The simple fact of the matter is they respond to the pressures of their peer group, and their peer group are the rich. The peer group are those who are in the high tax bracket, and maybe they don't like going to these fancy dinners and people nuzzling up to them and saying, I don't really like what you're doing about tax. And they bow to that pressure because they're small people with little principle and little intellect. Yeah, absolutely. And while this is going on, our SNP MPs are down there at Westminster. £900 million off the budget, Phil. $250,000 more people getting pushed into poverty, but the SNP are there. They're fighting for Scotland, stronger for Scotland. They said when they asked us to elect them. There was Stephen Gethins. He told us to watch his early day motion about Arbroath black pudding in the week when all this happened. Now, no harm to Arbroath black pudding, and let's give it as much publicity as possible. But please, why do we send people down to Westminster not to put in early day motions about black pudding when we're getting people thrown into poverty and our budget getting cut at, Phil?
Yeah, and I like Stephen. I knew him during the independence campaign. I knew him when working in the SNP. He's competent, capable, clever, good guy. But like the SNP, he's lost his ways. He's loyal. But the problem is, and he does want independence, but his career comes first, and that's the problem. You got to be in it to win it, is one of the arguments you would use to say, well, might as well fight from within. But if you're not fighting for Scotland's people from within the SNP, and I see very little evidence of this from anyone, then he would be another one who's gone by the wayside. Back on that total gimp, Ian Murray. As well as, obviously Sawar's a lying puppet. We've seen enough about that. But the Labour refusing about the Norwegians. Norway's got a much better system. Just look at the reality. And it starts with, how does it start with? Looking after the people. Proper taxation in oil and gas, which enables the greatest wealth fund in Europe, in fact, properly the world. And they do things like every barrel counts, higher taxes, greater welfare, putting their people number one. Norway's wealthy because of the oil resources. Rings any bells? It's one of the largest oil exporters in the world. Per capita, a bit like Scotland, similar reserves. Sovereign Wealth Fund, the government pension fund globally, financed by all revenues, is one of the largest sovereign wealth funds on the planet. And it helps secure long-term economic stability for the people because the government represent the people. And the main reason for this is their social democratic policies. Norway's political system, social welfare and equitable distribution of wealth, preventing economic abuses as we're seeing right now, and ensuring a high standard of living for its citizens. These elements combined create a robust economy and a high quality of life for Norwegians. Something that is completely attainable here in Scotland. And what do we get instead? We get clowns like this. Ian Murray. Scotland's voice has been heard loud and clear. So what did that voice say, Ian? Well, he says it was heard loud and clear ahead of the spending review. And when this was at the Scottish Affairs Committee at Westminster when he was questioned on Tuesday, and he said, it's been heard loud and clear by the UK Treasury ahead of an upcoming spending review. Is that right, you lying clown? Did we vote for 1 in 4 kids in poverty, closing Grangemouth, the lowest pension in Western world in real terms, waspy women having their rights denied, poorer welfare, cuts to education, cuts to healthcare, as it stumbles to failure cut after cut? Nah, Ian, you're a liar and a waste of space. I know some good jambos, but you're no one of them. And he was also questioned. I mean, it was like, he was also asked about the fairness of the Barnett formula, and this one really got me. Barnett formula calculates the amount of money, pocket money, we get back from all the money we send down to Westminster, to Holyrood every year. And he says, the Barnett formula has withstood the test of time and delivers fairness in terms of expenditure to Scotland. My arse. And I would urge you, go look at Grousepeter's site and his great article on John Jappy, one of our great undersung heroes. This there's a quote. In fact, I'll just read the quote from Grousepeter's site. This article comes from the blog of the late John Jappy. He is one of Scotland's unsung heroes, or he would be had we had an honours system of our own and the shared belief in our country as a homogeneous society. Excuse me. He ought to be up there among Scotland's 10 best champions of open democracy. There is no Wikipedia page on Jappy, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a decent obituary. And here we are in 2021, still answering the same inane questions thrown at us by defenders of a crooked, failed union. For all the truth he told, Jappy might as well have been a sandwich board man walking up and down the high street, his message reading destinies at hand. Meanwhile, cap doffers like Murray, waste of space twat that he is, also rejected ideas to change the current formula, including the rollout of a needs-based funding formula and calls from the Scottish Government to give in full fiscal economy. Ian Murray will not speak the truth for the benefit of the people, but rather for the benefit of his puppet masters. This guy cannot be trusted to represent the people of Scotland.
And it wasn't only that. The Labour, we elected 30 odd or whatever it was, Labour MPs, Eva, and they were going down to be a strong voice for Scotland, but they were all silent, or even worse, like this boy McKee. He was actually talking up what the cuts and protecting the elite. A Labour MP protecting that there was no tax cuts in the elite. He was one of them that said, they'll leave if we tax them. This is the Labour Party. This is the people that are meant to be representing Scotland's corner. They don't represent anyone but the British Labour Party, do they?
I remember back in 1992 being at a general election count in the town hall in Alloa, where the Young Nationalists, of whom I was then one, given that that's more than 30 years ago, were bawling and shouting at Martin O'Neill for having ditched the pledge for CND. So, vote Labour, get lies. It's been that way for all my adult life. This is not the Labour Party of old. It's not the Labour Party that post-war built hundreds of thousands of council houses, created and made the NHS flourish, supported unions, supported solidarity, supported working class people. The Labour Party has sold the jerseys long, long ago, probably before even the days of Tony Blair. What I'm reminded of when Phil is talking about heroes and an honours system and John Jappy, who would certainly be up there with the greatest, Another one who should be, and she's the epitome of what Scotland needs today, is Lynn Sheridan. I was at her funeral 10 days ago, and the outpouring of love and respect for that woman and for her family was overwhelming, because within Lynn's heart and soul was a burning desire for justice, for social justice, and she fought her whole life for that. And that is what Scotland needs today. People who understand completely that what people actually need. We need food on the table, money in our pocket, and we need the ability to hope that tomorrow will be better than today was. Not to be warmongering, not to be prioritising bombs over bairns, not to be talking in terms of how best and how quickly we can privatise the NHS. We should be spending our money on housing and energy and creating a country that Scotland is supposed to be. You know, our potential is overflowing in terms of natural resources and human resources, and yet it's been piped south to Westminster to bankroll wars that we ought not to be part of, infrastructure in England, and keeping fat cats in a very comfortable position when basically the poor, the weak, the disadvantaged, the vulnerable can go and get stuffed as far as the Labour Party are concerned, whether that's at Westminster or in Scotland. A notable exception is my own MP Brian Leishman, but once again, he's a voice in the wilderness, pleading for Grangemouth to be saved, pleading for these cuts not to be implemented. But I think Brian's understanding pretty quickly that he's in the wrong party, because the values that he espouses are no longer the values of the Labour Party. And to put it in context, another quote from that HMRC note: one of the things that the government's going to do is make a fully funded commitment to increase NATO qualifying defence spending to 2.5% of gross domestic product by 2027, including by providing an additional £2.2 billion of funding for the Ministry of Defence next year. That says it all. That's your Labour Party for you. The money is destined for warmongering, not for looking after pensioners or the sick, the vulnerable or the disabled. It's destined to be spent on war.
Yeah, bombs over bairns. They've changed it completely. But this is it. They're talking about, you know, everything's so bad, we're tight for money. Everything's so really terrible, Alan. But here's Mr. Lammy. He spent over £1 million in private flights in just 3 months. £14,000 a day on flights so he can go around pretending to be the big I am. This is the epitome of everything that's corrupt, rotten and absolutely disgusting about Westminster and Westminster Row.
Total hypocrisy from them again, because we all know that if they had the opportunity, they would remove every single pensioner's bus pass. Never mind £1 million flying all over the world, when half the time you don't have to go to these conferences. There's technology now, you could do it from your office. So why are we wasting all this money when there's people on the streets starving, people on the streets can't get a home? It's ridiculous. And they don't even have to spend one or raise one more penny on tax. Close the loopholes. You close the loopholes on tax, you will raise billions of pounds. But the Labour Party know, and so do the Tories, that wealthy people would rather pay them personally tens of thousands of pounds rather than millions of pounds into the system to pay for the benefit system, to pay for housing, to pay for policing, to pay for NHS. They'd rather have it in their own pockets, because we all know they're doing it. They're taking lots of things from millionaires and cutting benefits from the disabled. It's really, really got to stop.
But it's just, there's all these things, the hypocrisy of spending. There's 2 or 3 things here, Lloyd. Now, they're telling us there's no money and they're going to put money in defence. And my question to you about defence, but here's an example, an approved Paul down south. We've suddenly found £9 billion for a lower Thames crossing in the southeast of England, linking Tilbury, Essex and Gravesend in Kent by 2 tunnels underneath the Thames, £9 billion. But no money for Grangemouth, I would hasten to add. But the other one is that we've got this as well. Up in the north of England, who get treated almost as badly as Scotland, and they're not even a nation. British Steel plans to close the last steel plant in the whole of the UK. We used to have a huge steel industry. It's now going with 2,700 jobs. But here's the thing: they get the money for the 9 billion. They've not got any money to save Scunthorpe or Grangemouth, and they want to put extra money into defence. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, Lloyd, but you need a wee bit of steel if you're making tanks or armoured cars or artillery units. So are we going to ask our enemies, like the Chinese or the Russians, for steel so that we can shoot them and kill them? I mean, help me here.
Well, that would be apparently the plan that the crazy Rachel has for this. I mean, again, this is about values, and it's also about people who just say things because they think they're the right thing to say. This security of the country, security of Europe mantra that's going on at the moment, this fits in perfectly with it. We will build our arms industry to such a point that we'll be selling it all over the world. Yeah, well, you've made some bloody good adverts for your military equipment. There's 2 aircraft carriers that can barely go to sea for more than a week before having to go back in and get fixed. Then we've got the rusting hulks of the submarines. We've got the nuclear deterrent that can't fly. We've got the Ajax fighting vehicle that's still somewhere trying to be built. The history of British defence procurement is a history of throwing money down a dirty, great big stank in larger and larger amounts each and every year. And how that is suddenly going to change because Rachel Reeves is in charge, and that idiot Lammy's in charge, and that somewhat evil creature who's the Minister of Defence, Healy. This is a nonsense. This is an absolute and utter nonsense. Now, how anybody, and here's one for the mainstream media, how can they say that they're going to build up defence and at the same time destroy the last vestiges of the steel industry? When is a reporter going to ask them, where are you going to get the steel from? Where are you going to get, in this time of tariffs, in this time of sabre rattling, who's going to sell Britain steel? But that's not the issue. The main issue here is we have been told yet again that a British government is going to embark on imperial nonsense on our behalf. And the only answer in real terms for us, and this is what I want to hear from Scottish National Party and Scottish Government ministers, is we need to get out of this, because the future's been laid out for us. It's a future of providing weapons, building weapons, and using weapons. And that's the way we're going to grow the economy. That involves people dying. It's as simple and straightforward as that. Do we want to be attached to a country that's going to embark on a repeat of 200 years of its previous history into the 20th century? Here we are, we're only 25 years into the 21st century, and we're embarking on 17th century politics. That's what's happening here. It's time for Scotland to get out of this. And if the leaders of the Scottish National Party believe in independence, they must believe in it for a reason. Now, is that reason entirely economic? Is that reason because they have principles and they believe that we should take a more neutral approach in the world, that we shouldn't involve ourselves in unnecessary war? If that was the core of it, then surely the only and ever answer for want of a better description, the parent country is deciding to go down the path of war, you have a choice of going down the path of peace. Why is it? Why is it that the Scottish Government has not highlighted this to the people? The fact of the matter is, a defence-based economy in Britain requires that we kill people. And also, the number of defence jobs in Scotland are extremely limited. Not to mention also the fact that the vast majority of them are not with companies that are British owned. Some are Israeli owned, some are French owned, some are Italian owned. The fact is, these jobs will go elsewhere. If Britain, outside of the European Union, decides that it is going to enter into the worldwide market on arms, then it will be in direct competition with Belgium, France, Italy, Spain, Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Now, And that's the countries that are supposed to be on our side. Who of those countries is going to say, yeah, go on, you can have a wee slice of our market. You can have a wee slice of what we've been selling for the past few years. It's not going to happen. This is a complete and utter chimera, this whole concept that we can rebuild the British economy on the basis of defence. It's a nonsense.
Yeah. None of us here are military people, Phil, but you've had some exposure to it when you were a member of Parliament. You've told us about it before. This is, as Lloyd highlighted, thinking that we can recover the economy and we're all going to be in the land of labour, milk and honey because we're going to build more arms and weapons is a nonsense and a dangerous one.
It is, because it's fantasy. To do that, you need a manufacturing base, which has been slowly, gradually, painstakingly and very effectively deconstructed by the West. Britain no longer has the ability to do this. I mean, we lost Ravenscraig, which was creating some of the best sheet steel on the planet, and it was closed. Why? Because they don't give a damn. They're deindustrialising. This was Thatcher's deindustrialisation. The deindustrialisation of the West, and now Germany. I never thought I'd see the day that the Germans would fall foul of this, but they're also, but it's the energy that's deconstructing them. You know, there's companies, 200-year-old sheet metal working companies, or companies that work in steel and cast way back to the cast iron days, that are shutting down in Germany now. Why? Cost of energy. I mean, so this it's a total con. We're looking for cheap manufacturing around the world. At the same time, the saber-rattling jingoism cracks on and ramps up. To have a military-industrial complex, the big difference here, and this is a significant one that people should understand, there's a lot of work. You'd have to do a lot of studying into this, so it's not readily available. But basically, the Western arms manufacturing is a business that's based on making weapons to make money. Whereas you look at the Russians and the Chinese and the other more effective manufacturers, they make weapons to do what they're designed to do, which is to kill people effectively and economically. Now, horrible subject, but you do need defence. Not offence, I would urge, but certainly defence in this modern world. And Britain is just a joke. I mean, this steel plant, right? The closure of this plant after failing to agree a package with the UK government, who is that exactly? Well, it's British Steel says it's planning to close its 2 blast furnaces and steel-making operations in the north, in Scunthorpe, which needs this little hole in the head, and its Chinese owners, Jingye, failed to agree a rescue package with the UK government. So, British Steel? No, it isn't. Said Thursday that it's planning to close the 2 blast furnaces, right, in Scunthorpe, because it couldn't sort a deal out. And the union's called the government to help secure the future of the company, which Jingye is suffering daily losses of around £700,000, right? Despite the Chinese firm investing allegedly more than $1.2 billion to maintain operations since it took over in 2020. This is Britain's second biggest steelmaker, right? Blamed highly challenging market conditions from China, the imposition of tariffs and the higher environmental costs relating to the production of high carbon steel. And it says it wanted to consult with them to invest in 2 new electric arc furnaces, which would emit far less carbon into the atmosphere. Our economics have been driven into the ground by false concerns about carbon. This will come home to roost eventually when all the formal papers are reported. Carbon, CO2 is not the problem. You should certainly not be destroying your steel industry because some report says carbon's bad. Not really not happy with this at all, but what can you do? The con game continues, the asset stripping of the British economy and the Western economy continues, and there's nothing we can do except getting our own independence and taking control of our own destiny.
Yeah. Now, one of the things we know, Eva, is that before a policy appears or something happens, they love to trial it in one of their tame newspapers, and they get one of their people to do it. And this was, I don't know, I didn't see much about this in social media, but this appeared in the Herald, where the talk about ending free tuition. and it's just, just an idea by someone. But that's usually the precursor for suddenly it appearing as a policy. And it's with no doubt, if the Labour Party with the Unionists coalition take 26, it wouldn't be long in ending tuition fees and getting rid of our water company, which I'll come on to in a minute.
Well, I started off my contribution today by talking about principles rather than, boring old statistics. And I can't walk away from this discussion that we've just had about steel without remembering Ian Lawson and his principles. Mm-hmm. And his defence of the Scottish steel industry was based on, an absolutely first-class knowledge and understanding of the importance of that industry to Scotland and the Scottish economy. Because Ian was a man of principle, and his principles extended, like all of ours do, to the notion that education should be free for everybody, because it should be a human right to be able to be educated and to realise your own individual potential, not just because that's good for you as an individual, but because it completely and absolutely benefits our society. So as soon as we start talking about education becoming means-tested and somehow something that is not a right, that is something that's got to be bought and paid for, we diminish ourselves as a society, and that's what this policy will do. I'd have gone to university, whether it was paid for or not, because my mum and dad would have made sure that happened. But nobody, not everybody is as fortunate as I was. But my dad worked in the steel industry, worked in the oil industry. And today, when I read headlines like that, I think about the people that I went to school with, who went to uni, who got qualifications, who have made the world a better place, who've improved their lot, and they've improved the lot of our community, our world, our society, because they got to get that university education that they should have been entitled to as of right. And I want that for everybody in Scotland. I want the ability for us to be an educated nation. One of the most educated nations on the planet was actually the people of Syria. The numbers of people there who had university degrees was absolutely phenomenal, because they understood there for literally hundreds and thousands of years that education is a route out of poverty, it is a route to betterment, and it is the right thing to do. And I shudder to think that all the positive benefits that came through either Scotland finding itself almost on a world stage with devolution, being able to pass policies like no tuition fees, Alex Salmond again, we keep going back to him saying the rocks will melt in the sun. All of these are such precious achievements that we've got to defend at all costs. Because if we don't, the outcome will be that boys and girls that Jimmy Reid spoke about behind the tenement windows in Govan or elsewhere within Scotland won't get to go to uni and become the person that discovers the cure for cancer, or follows in the footsteps of Alexander Fleming or any of the great Scottish inventors. What we'll find is the only people that become educated are those with the money and the elite and the privileged and the entitled. And that does not form part of the Scottish psyche today, and I hope it never does.
No, I mean, it is one of those precious things, Alan, that we're proud of, is the free education. And Scottish education has always been a thing that's been close to our heart. But here we have, a cut, another cut. I'm in my, I'm mid-70s now. I can never remember a time when there wasn't a recession and austerity, pull your belt in with one more notch. And they've definitely got their eyes on bringing in tuition fees just like England. That is the plan, isn't it?
Yeah, it always has been their plan. I mean, Labour didn't really want the tuition fees to go in Scotland. But I mean, if you look at opinion polls, how opinion polls on these type of things work is you work from the answer backwards. People don't come to your door and say, do you want to continue having free tuition fees, or do you want people to start paying for them? What they do is they ask you 5 or 6 questions beforehand, all worded in such a way that the only answer you could give at the end is the answer that they want to get from you. It's all manipulated. They know what the answer is going to be before you get to that. So that's not really what people believe in. It's what they're being told to believe in. And that's what's happening too much in this country. We're being told what to believe, not how to think. But tuition is so important for everyone. We know that Scotland has a wealth of knowledge. Scotland practically invented the modern world. If we start charging people for tuition fees again, what's going to happen to all these great brains? What inventions are we never ever going to see just simply because someone could not afford to go to the next stage in their education? This isn't just about giving one person an education. This is giving the whole country an opportunity to get something back from these people who we are helping to educate. It's a rolling process. It's not just about one person going forward, it's the whole country going forward. And the youth are our future, and we've got to support them at every stage of the way.
Yeah. It's all this hypocrisy and double standards that gets me, Lloyd. And I pointed out the ridiculousness of, or rather the lack of priorities by Stephen Gethins during this week of this, all these cuts and all this horrific budget, talking about Arbroath, what was it, Smokies, or I can't mind now, black pudding. But here's another one. After he's, talking about weapons, we need better weapons. They all care. We promised we would get rid of, we would take action. We're getting rid of ninja swords off the street. Would it not be better to get rid of the ninjas instead of the ninja swords? I mean, in Japan, they've got ninja swords. They don't have the same problem. Because most of these things, and I'm not saying completely, but poverty is one of the poverty and greed are the two biggest problems in Western society for sure. And surely it's more like get rid of the poverty, not just the ninja swords, Keir.
Maybe this is how he's going to solve the steel problem. If we take all the swords off everybody now and stockpile them, we can maybe turn them into tanks later.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. No, this is all performative. In actual fact, and Phil, I'm sure will back me up on this. There's this strange thing happens in elected politics. You have to get in your local paper, and if you're the Prime Minister, you just have to be in the paper all the time. So the ninja swords nonsense is not really a story, but it keeps Keir's name up there. So that's what his press people are doing. Meanwhile, for Mr. Gethins, he wants to be in the local paper. So the Black Pudding Company won an award, blah blah blah. So he puts out the press release because that's what you do. That's part of your job as a member of Parliament. It's nonsense. It's utter and complete nonsense. In that same week that he congratulated the Black Pudding people, he failed to attend the Westminster Hall debate on drug deaths. Not one member of the Scottish National Party group in Westminster attended the debate on drug deaths when we have, per capita, the highest drug deaths in the world. Now, that shows you the priorities. Black Pudding, nice wee story. Stephen will get his picture in the paper. He'll be able to tell folk that he's doing things. He's helping out this local business. How many people died of drug overdoses in his constituency last year? How many families who've suffered in that situation will look at press releases like "Good on you, Black Pudding" and think we don't care? This is where the big disconnect comes. Politicians who learned how to be politicians within the political bubble and nothing else. I mean, Stephen Gethins sat at a desk less than 2 meters away from me for 2 years when I was a member of the Scottish Parliament because he worked for Andrew Wilson. That's what he did straight out of university. This is another one. Yeah, he's a totally affable guy, but he's got the principles of a rattlesnake. That's the facts. I mean, when it comes right down to it. Yeah. We make excuses for people. Or they had to do it, or they would have been on their own. They couldn't stand up purely on their own. Well, sorry, don't get into politics if you're not prepared to stand by your principles. And if you melt and bend, but then, hey, I'm off on another one. But just one other thing, just going back to what Alan said, just very briefly, Roddy, about education. We have people making decisions about education, both in the Westminster Parliament and the Scottish Parliament, about overall educational principle, whose children are not in the public education system. Their children go to fee-paying schools. They live in a different, they see education in a completely different way. In actual fact, by the simple, straightforward fact that they send their children to fee-paying schools, they have made a statement that state education is not good enough. It's not good enough for their children. Now, if they are the very same people who are deciding the budgets, they're deciding what nature and direction education would take, when in actual fact they know little or nothing other than reports. They're not standing at the gates. They don't know the parents. So long as we have that separation where our political class send their children to private school and then make decisions about what happens in state education, we're going to get it wrong. But more importantly, and I look forward to the day, an independent Scotland should do what Finland did. No fee-paying, profit-making schools. All kids start at exactly the same level and go in. Money is not an advantage in education. That is the educational principle that has existed in Scotland since the 14th century. Originally, the free education run by the church, then run by the new church after the Reformation, up until 1870. Anyone and everyone who lived within the environs of Edinburgh could attend any and every lecture at Edinburgh University without being a matriculated student. That was the nature of our democratic intellect, the nature of our democratic education. The imposition post-1850 of fee-paying schools has corrupted our society at a level that we don't even properly recognise at the moment. But think about it this way. If people are making decisions about your child's education, when in actual fact they've stated by putting their children into a private run school, they have said, you are second rate, your system is second rate, my child needs something better. I don't want to live in a country where people have that attitude. It's the most ridiculous, socially divisive system that we have. Rant over.
Yeah, indeed. Well done. That's what you're here for, a rant. We like a good rant. I'll give a good rant from you now, Mr. Boswell. I mean, one of the things that we completely, all our shows, as we say right at the beginning, it's all about independence. It's all about getting rid of Westminster Rule. And we need independence. Now, one of our viewers got in touch with me this week to tell me they were going to the SNP travelling cabinet meeting in Kirkintilloch. And they told me the question they were going to ask. And the question they were going to ask was, would the SNP be supporting the salvo liberation moves at the United Nations? Just as we in this programme are, just as Indie for India are, as ISP are, and as we saw it this week, ALAPA seem to be supporting it as well. Now that was the question they asked, will you, and what's your plan for independence? And this is what our Angus said.
Will the Scottish Government get behind the Salvo Liberation Initiative at the UN for the good of the country?
People in other countries, and that includes the European Union, want to make sure that if we are going to decide about our future, it takes place in a recognised and agreed referendum process. And that's exactly what we had in 2014. So the challenge for us is to make sure that we can secure that referendum and have a choice. Again, I make the point this should make no difference to whether one supports independence or not. It's about whether we believe that we should be able to determine our own future in this country. That's the position of the Scottish Government. It is the choice that we wish you to be able to have. We're committed to do that. We want that to happen as quickly as we can make it happen. Although I would counsel, I am slightly sceptical of a view that there may be shortcuts to being able to do that. We're going to have to impress on the UK government that if it wants to retain its international standing as a democratic state, it has to allow the people to choose their own democratic future.
That tells me two things. They don't have a Scooby, Phil, and Section 30 is still their only plan, and that the British government somehow or other are going to get rid of their cash cow, of their money tree, and give in to the SNP because they asked them eventually, nicely. I don't know. Tell me, have I misread that?
No, Angus should be wearing a Union Jack badge. That is the line of the MI5 of the 77th Brigade, of those who would keep us on our knees. The guy's a stooge. The guy should not be representing the people of Scotland. I used to call on him I used to respect him, because I went in, I didn't know a great deal about politics. I went in with a great deal of other experience, but I bowed to those who I assumed knew more about it. How wrong I was. This guy's been infiltrated. If he ever was genuinely into the independence movement, I don't know, because I don't know him that long, but I've known him for since 2012, 2015, in fact before that, 2013 is when I first met Angus, and he came to my house along with others as the military section of the white paper was drafted or a draft of it was put together in my dining room. And as I told you before, my contribution was, how would you like your steak done? Because, you know what I mean? There was a Clausewitzian military strategist, Colin Fleming, brilliant guy. I won't name all the rest of them, but some really, really good people. Some serving officers, friends of mine from the British Army, and Angus Robertson. He'd said to me, we just want to test them out to see if they're trustworthy. Well, you know what? He totally deflected, because the true answer is my good friends are trustworthy, who are now ex-serving British officers, senior officers. The person who should have been suspect is Angus Robertson, because if you're coming out with a line like that right now, you're not for the people. You're stating that the 2014 mandate was correct and that system was the right way to go and is the only way to go. It was foisted upon us. Alex took the best crack at the title we could go. I believe he won, because there are two people that I know, and I hope this will come out when they're ready. We'll have to wait on them retiring. Two officers, counting officers, who saw the switching out of boxes at that of the postal votes at that referendum. Anyway, I would like to see the truth come out here, but the truth will eventually out, and one of these truths is that Angus Robertson is not a servant of the people of Scotland, he's a servant of the government of the UK.
You asked, do we think that Angus has been infiltrated? I believe he's been infiltrated a few times, but that's another story for another day. Eva, they don't have a clue. They're a one-trick pony. We'll give us another mandate and we'll get a Section 30. It's just preposterous.
Yeah, but they're doing it deliberately. They're not that clueless. They're not that stupid. They're not that donut. They're doing it on purpose. They don't want independence. If the current leadership of the SNP wanted independence, then the question that was asked by your friend would have been answered honestly. And the honest answer would be that the SNP supports each and every individual campaign or campaigner or activist whose principles are the urgent necessity of independence for our country. That's plain and simple. But he didn't answer the question. He was asked, will you support the Liberation Initiative? He didn't answer it. He spoke about the desire for an independence referendum, for a Section 30. He deflected. And what should happen is that every single time that he appears on stage or for an interview, he should be asked by every journalist and every citizen, every member, every audience, what's your position on liberation? What's your position on independence? How the hell do you think we're going to get a referendum? It's not going to happen. There's not going to be another referendum granted by Westminster unless Westminster are convinced that no will win. That's when we'll get a referendum. But when it looks like yes would win, it ain't going to happen, which is why we need other initiatives, including particularly the one that I think it would be Kenny McCaskill, Neil Hanvey and others spoke about at the Alba conference this weekend, where they want to see unity within the movement. And fair play to them, because that's something they've been saying since Alba launched back in 2021. And the supermajority should be on the cards for next year's election. Of course it should be. There is no doubt about that. But what we are seeing just now is the SNP lining up for SNP 1, SNP 2, and talking in terms of how a vote for the SNP makes it stronger for Scotland, which is complete and utter guff, because the support for the SNP is at a level where they will not replicate what Alex Salmond did in 2011. There will not be a supermajority of SNP MSPs. It's not possible, because support for independence far outstrips support for the SNP by a country mile. Support for independence is over 50%. Support for the SNP is somewhere at the 30-odd% level. You just have to do the figures, do the maths, work it out. It's not going to be an SNP supermajority, but it would be a supermajority for independence were there a united campaign. Now, it's no secret that we had the PRISM Summit, where a lot of fairly experienced, knowledgeable people got together and spoke about how we can create the circumstances where independence can happen. But those circumstances require people to put country before party, and to principle over power, and to look collectively at what is best for our country. And what is best for our country is a united campaign driving towards independence, where we have one candidate for Scottish independence in each constituency, and a coordinated, concerted effort on the list. Our country requires that. In its absence, what we will have again will be what we had in 2021, which Alex Salmond in Alba, and we were part of that, obviously, you and I, Roddy and Alan, cautioned against, which was SNP 1 and 2 letting unionists in on the list. And that cannot happen this time. If it does happen, it will be a death knell for the SNP. They will be finished after that, because people will see through them for what they are, putting themselves and their party ahead of the needs of our country. And never before has independence been so urgently required. You know, we talk about, for example, the budget and cuts and this, you know, the spring statement and Rachel from accounts, and you know, we've had a wee joke about it here and there, but it is deadly, literally deadly serious. Alan said people will die as the result of these cuts. People are dying in Scotland unnecessarily every single day. They're dying as the result of poverty. They're dying as the result of health inequality that comes from unnecessary poverty, because poverty is man-made. Nobody in Scotland should die as the result of poverty. We're an energy-rich, potentially very, very rich country, one of the most wealthy on the planet. But we've got record numbers of people dying from drugs again, as Lloyd alluded to, alcoholism. We've got the madcap minimum unit pricing for alcohol, which isn't doing the job it was designed to do. We have old people literally freezing to death. There are official statistics for the number of folk that die as the result of hypothermia in Scotland. How awful is that? We have queues of folk waiting to get into care homes. We've got backlogs of social work assessments for old folk that are needing home care. All of that is unnecessary, and it would be wiped away at the stroke of a pen had we the control of our own resources. That's what we need. And it is on John Swinney this weekend to lift the phone, as we've said so many times before, to Kenny McCaskill, to Colette Walker, to Sarah Sawyers, to the All Under One Banner people, and to get people together, get that convention up and running, and create the route map to our country's liberation forthwith, because it will be the making of our country. It will be a lifesaver, and it heralds a new dawn that Scotland desperately requires and deserves.
Absolutely. Eve is 100% correct there, Alan, that if they do again SNP 1-2, they are dead in the water. But they're not the only thing we're dead in the water, because what will be dead is we've had our free education will go. Our water company will be sold, and you don't want to end up like England, where in the last year almost 4 million hours of literally shit going into the rivers and the seas. That's what will happen in Scotland. Your universities will go, the Scottish water will go, the poverty will increase, more people will die, our chances of survival get less and less. We need to unite. We need to get the SNP on board, because they don't have a clue, do they?
They don't, and unfortunately the SNP will be going down the next election saying SNP 1, SNP 2. Now, Angus Robertson said on that clip that there is no shortcuts. Nobody has ever said there's a shortcut to independence. For one thing, to take a shortcut, you need a road. The SNP have blown that road up. Liberation.Scot, Salvo, Indy for Indy, and every other independence organisation, ALBA included, are rebuilding that road to independence. Just unfortunately, every time we turn round, the SNP are taking more potholes out the back of us. But here's a warning to the SNP. You now have 1 year to the next election. You either get on board with us or we will take you down. We will not let anyone stand in front of independence. You have been well warned. We tried to tell you at the last election. You let the unionists in. We're not going to take that anymore. We have our services to protect. We cannot allow Scottish water to go down the tubes like English water. Although I believe the sewage problem around the Thames got fixed a wee bit. They put a ban on MPs swimming there. But even everything that's coming from Westminster up to Scotland, it's just bringing more hatred with everyone. I mean, you mentioned the samurai swords, Roddy. That's to do with the attacks in England. They're not being attacked by ninja swords. They're being attacked by machetes, steak knives. This is just playing to Reform. And I believe Reform's new manifesto has been created by AI. It's called Chat KKK.
Very good. Very good. The clock is beaten. There's just a couple of things. This week I noticed this. I'm wearing it as a badge of honour, actually. An SNP, one of the culty, put out all these people at Wings Over Scotland, myself and others, ALPA, ISP, were all traitors to Scotland and obviously British Unionists. I never knew that. It was news to me. But there you go, that was this one. But I just want to say, we have to enthuse the people, Lloyd. We have to get the people up and running. You need leadership. You need someone who can get the people on their feet. And I just want to show you, this is it. And the kids are our future. Put all those things together, folks. Here's our First Minister.
That will enable people to avoid car use. So there are a variety of interventions that we make. There are substantial amounts of public expenditure utilised to support the provision of bus services. The concessionary travel scheme raises significant opportunities for travel. There is wider public subsidy for public transport.
You had those kids whipped up, Lloyd, eh? They were so enthused by him.
I think they were all wondering which particular language class they were in, because it didn't sound like English to me. No, it's totally unfair that children are put through such torture when they could be learning something. But forcing them to go to a committee room in the Scottish Parliament and listen to John Swinney prattling on was only going to have one outcome, and that was a mass desertion. Good on them. Those kids know the future. That could be the situation come that day in May in 2026, John, if you don't start waking up to the realities.
Yep. Yeah, they could be doing other things like learning how to use a ninja sword. I mean, they could be doing that. Anyway, as usual, the clock's beaten. There's a few things I didn't get in, I wanted to get in. Where Keir Starmer gets something right this week, folks. I know, and it might sound amazing, and it's a discussion we'll maybe come back to, and it was simply this, that he's right on this, that the Lord Advocate, Operation Branchform showed that the Lord Advocate should not be in the Scottish Cabinet, and that needs to be separated, and that's a discussion I'd like to have at some other time. But there's so much, we never have enough time. But we will be back next week, and as I say, my good buddy Mr. Boswell, he'll be with me. I don't know whether we'll be in the same room or not. We'll certainly be on the same alcohol. And until that time, we look forward to you and yours. Please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.